This is the Social Reform and the Progressive Era, Chapter 5 of our reading. The three main focuses here are the turning point, women, children, and early labor reforms, and limits and selectivity of reform. With the first point, the Progressive Era as a turning point, what happened was during the late 19th and 20th centuries, the U.S. faced rapid industrialization, immigration, and labor unrest. Some social issues, including unsafe working conditions, child labor, poverty, and crowded tenements, had become highly visible. And why does this matter? Reformers and muckrakers, as they were called, pushed for government involvement in areas traditionally left to families, churches, or private charities. This was a major shift, as for the first time, there was a widespread belief that government had some responsibility to protect citizens' welfare through regulation and social programs. And its connection to reluctance was that even though the era marked a move toward government action, the changes were reactive. The U.S. still avoided broad national welfare commitments, unlike the European countries that were experimenting with social insurance. Secondly, we have women, children, and early labor reforms. What happened here was that many progressive reforms focused on vulnerable groups, including child labor restrictions, schooling, and protective labor laws for women. For example, Mueller v. Oregon, which upheld limits on women's work hours. And settlement houses like Jane Addams' Hull House, also became key institutions for helping immigrants and the poor. And this matters because these reforms created legal precedents and institutional structures that later expanded into broader welfare policies. And its connection to reluctance was that the protections were selective. So obviously men, racial minorities, and other immigrant groups were excluded or ignored. And then another key point here is the limits and selectivity of reform. And what happened here was the progressive era saw advances, for example, new regulations, public health initiatives, and workers' comp. Government spending and the scope of the programs kind of remained minimal. And this matters because the cautious approach kind of laid the foundation for Jansen's idea of the reluctant welfare state. And the U.S. expanded welfare only in narrow ways, and they only addressed urgent things rather than committing to, trying to fix everything in a universal manner. And its connection to the reluctance, the era shows how deeply embedded American skepticism towards government and social spending has been. And even reforms were framed as limited interventions and not a whole embrace of welfare. And that's it. Thank you.